Hi there, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of TechTalk Dudes. And today, Pim and I are talking about authentication methods. And the reasoning why it's because we are using or able to use MFA for quite a long time, and Azure AD provides you various options and capabilities to configure, which is not always clear to us and not always efficient, I would say it that way. And that's also combining with the trends we are seeing there, the MFA authentication methods, traditional or more legacy ones, which are not always resistant to phishing, for example, like SMS. They're not that secure. There are more secure phishing resistant authentication methods. And that's something Pim and I are eager to talk about. And hey, Pim, welcome to this episode. And I'm really excited and looking forward to talk about authentication methods and what you are able to show us today.
Yeah, thanks, Ronnie, for this swift and nice introduction into the authentication methods. And hi, everyone who is watching, of course. Important, I think, with authentication methods to mention is that it's of course the method which you're using, in this case as a second factor or as your passwordless factor to get into your account. But as you also probably know, those methods can be configured on multiple places within the Microsoft Cloud. For example, we got the authentication methods policy screen, where you can configure those methods within Azure AD. We got the legacy authentication methods for MFA on the legacy MFA blades. And we got the SSPR methods, which are again separately managed. Now, recently, Microsoft introduced a preview where you can consolidate all those authentication methods to be managed from one single policy screen, which is, of course, really, really great because it's not only from a simplicity perspective, where you can manage all your authentication methods from the same blade, but for security, it's important. It's an improvement as well, because at this point in time, if you didn't do the migration, which we are going methods on a tenant scale. So if you enable SMS, or if you've enabled voice, or if you have enabled the Authenticator app, you do that from the legacy MFA portals, and you did it for your whole tenant, meaning all those methods are available to all of your users. And now, if you would consolidate those to the authentication methods policies, and that would be a great security there's a great security benefit there as well, because I'm able then to target them to specific users, actually specific groups, so users in groups, meaning I would be able to say, for these users, I, for example, enable the Authenticator app for all of them, for all of the users, but on the other end, I'm enabling SMS or voice calls for a small set of users. And as you maybe have heard already, SMS hijacking is something which is happening very often. So with that, you are actually reducing your attack surface by making sure only the users who actually have a need to use those methods, for example, because they don't have a smartphone, to make sure that the users who do have a smartphone at least are only able to use, for example, the Microsoft Authenticator app, or have a security key enabled in their account. So that's that's something I want to go over with you today, Ronnie, and actually do the migration in my own tenant.
Yeah, if you ask me, enough talking, and just show us how we can get rid of these legacy MFA methods, and how we can migrate them in a converged way, because that sounds to me not only from a security and a user experience, it's more convenient, but also from an admin perspective, sounds to me, beneficial. So what do we see here, Pim? This is the authentication methods blade in Azure AD.
Yeah. If you go to security, hit authentication methods, and then you end up on this particular blade. And as you can already see, previously we saw here FIDO keys, Microsoft Authenticator, certificate-based authentication. But as you can see, email OTP, voice calls, third-party software OAuth tokens, and SMS have been added to this screen. Meaning you are able to configure it and target it to particular users, all your users, user groups, etc., which is great from the security perspective I just mentioned. And as you can see, it's saying manage migration, meaning we're able to migrate. Now, by default, within a tenant, it's always set to pre-migration until January 2024, which means I use the policy for authentication only, and if it's not matching, if it's not there, I'm still looking at the authentication methods options in the legacy MFA portal, as you can see right here, or if I'm using SSPR to the authentication methods configured beneath SSPR. So it's total separate management. It's actually management on three separate blades, 3 separate settings. Very inefficient, if you would ask me. Now, what will be then the first step if I would recommend, if I needed to recommend you something? The first step, which you need to take, is to make sure those methods from password reset, the authentication methods from password reset, and the methods which are configured within your legacy MFA portal are actually matching the methods within the authentication methods blade. And you can easily do that without any user impact, because if you're allowing it on both places, it doesn't change. So there won't be any kind of interruption for your end users.
That's good to mention that, Pim. So thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, once you have done that, so once you did that, once you have made it matching, and I already did it because otherwise we're talking for ages right here, you can say migration in progress, and you can then hit save. What it actually does, it's using the policy which you configured here for authentication and SSPR. But if something is not matching in here, it will still look at the old policies configured. So it will still do SSPR. Now, I can then right now in here hit save without any impact. I just changed this, changed it that it's primarily looking not only for authentication, but also for SSPR right now to the authentication methods policies. Now, once you have made sure everything is in place and you are happy to actually cut over, if I may say so, you can go to the let's start with the legacy MFA portal. You can safely turn down methods one by one. So if you've made sure that your call to phone has been moved over, you can disable it right here, hit save. Same for text, same for notification to mobile app, and same for verification code for mobile app or hardware token. One thing important here to mention is that if you're using hardware tokens, you're not able to complete the migration. You still need to have this box checked, but you can still disable the upper 3 of them because hardware tokens, as you may or have already noticed, are at this point in time not an option within the authentication methods screen. But as I'm not using that as well, I don't use hardware tokens. I disable the setting and I hit save. And just an FYI, security keys are no hardware tokens. Hardware tokens are those fancy old keys, which, for example, is something like this, which is popping up a number. Now, once I've saved this, I can hit close. And as you can see, all those methods are disabled. And because I've enabled those settings to all of my users, I can safely migrate this over. Then let's have a look at the self-service password reset screen. Now in here, because I just changed the setting from migration in progress, I first need to do a refresh because otherwise it didn't notice the migration in progress checkbox was hit. And I can do the same right here. So I can uncheck the settings in here one by one If I migrate it over my app, I can hit save. If I migrate it over email, I can hit save. Same for mobile phone, same for Office phone. And as you can see, I haven't any methods checked, but I'm still able to hit the save button to save the password reset policy, because password reset is now mainly looking at the authentication method screen. Now, at this point in time, I've actually already migrated all my authentication methods into one consolidated screen and managed from one single point of view. So from now on, I can hit migration complete. Could be that it throws me an error because I need to refresh as well in here, because it didn't know that my SSPR is migrated. And sometimes it can also take a little bit of time. So let's first go over the beneficial things which this can offer you. So some things which have changed in these screens are, for example, within the Microsoft Authenticator option, I can now enable or disable OTPs. So the 6-digit number, which is appearing in the Authenticator app, that's something which you are allowed to use by default. But now Microsoft offers you an option to disable that method as well. Another thing which is maybe is that third-party software OAuth tokens, like the Google Authenticator app, is something you can now enable or disable as well for use in your tenant, which previously you weren't able to do.
And you showed also the self-service password reset. You had also an option about the secure questions. Are these also available in here, or is that something like similar to the hardware tokens?
Very, very good question. Now, as you can see, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. It's cloud. I've now set the migration to complete. And to go back to your question immediately, if I now hit refresh on the password reset methods, I can see all the methods except security questions are grayed out.
There you go.
I think this already answers a little bit of your question. The only thing, and it's a little bit the same like with the hardware tokens, security questions is still something you need to manage separately, as in today, from the authentication method screen.
Okay.
Although I seriously hope, not a lot of people are using this functionality, because I always forget the answers which I'm typing in. So
it's not your pet or something else.
Yeah. So that's why it's actually disabled in my tenant, because I type something in and then after a year or two I need it, and then I don't know anymore what I filled in here.
Hey, but that's great as well, that these options are grayed out, because that for the smart kids, which after migration, which was thinking, well, I'm still trying or unconsciously, unintentionally checking these boxes, it's not possible anymore. So that's also great that you're really phasing out and migrating off of the legacy MFA options here.
Yeah, and as you can see on the legacy MFA portal, it's also going to grayed out. So that's actually cool. The migration as in today. I just wanted to mention one other important thing. Within SSPR, we also got the administrator policy. This will stay for now. So these methods for admins. Authentication methods policies do apply, but still the SSPR administrator policy does apply as well. So this is not migrated over. That's important. Important thing to mention. And of course, what I wanted to mention is that email OTP is the password reset authentication method email for resetting your password. It's a little bit, the name is a little bit different, so that's why maybe a little bit more explanation is needed. Why I enabled this for all of my users, because I cannot use email OTP as an MFA setting, and it's also described in the that it's used here for self-service password recovery or for your B2B guest users. So that's I think an important thing to mention as well.
Hey Pim. Now we were successfully able to migrate these authentication methods. One question which keeps me buzzing in my head is the fact, how do you know actually that your users aren't using anymore the legacy MFA authentication methods. You explained this very well, but is there a way to keep track on this?
That's also a very good question. So my first way of migrating would be go over as is. So that would be my first advice. Don't go making groups already, because you can do that easily afterwards. And to come back to your question in this case, yes, we can actually see what kind of methods are used within your tenant for authentication prompts. And for that, you can easily go to the section workbooks in Azure AD. And in here you can click on, there is a workbook called Authentication Prompt Analysis. And in here, we can see how the users are prompted to do their authentication. So I can in here see I got 5 passwordless phone sign-ins in the past 24 hours. I got 3 Authenticator app prompts in the past 24 hours and 2 password prompts. Password prompts could be, for example, a sign-in from a Windows device with a password. So that's actually where you can see it. And I don't use SMS and voice, although they are enabled, but that's not my primary method. It's more like my fallback method. And yes, still insecure, SMS hijacking, I know. But that's the way you can see it. And from here, you can easily go and disable your methods. And from here, you can see as well, a little bit more details about what the user is then actually accessing, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
So this can give you the right tools to make sure that you limit down specific methods, basically insecure methods, to not all users, but for example to a particular selected group.
Yeah, well, these insights are very helpful because you see also the impact there from what currently methods are being used, but also for the intentional, the intended behavior you want to, or the authentication methods you want actually to promote, or which are the most secured or phishing resistant, but also user convenient. That's what you also showed with the authenticator methods. You have more options here to give you your end users. And is there something also impacting from an end user perspective? I can imagine that you also need to inform your end users if you are introducing new authentication methods. Is that also something you recommend?
Well, if you go over as is, nothing should change actually for your end users, of course. But if you're going to introduce, if you're planning to introduce new authentication methods as well, like FIDO2 security keys, they will become an option for the user to register from the security info within their accounts. So if you are enabling new methods, I would at least advise you to make sure that the right manuals are there so that users need to know what they actually need to do. But if you are migrating, as I already mentioned, go over as is, then nothing changes, and then you don't need to write additional manuals. One thing I actually forgot to mention, and what is important, is to make sure that the combined security info registration is turned on. That should already be turned on by Microsoft, because Microsoft should already have enabled it for you. Yeah. If that's still not enabled, then that's the first thing to do.
And why is it that important to mention that security registration has been enabled?
Because the combined security info registration is the registration for MFA and SSPR, and authentication methods is handling both of them. If combined security info is separately, so not combined actually, then you got SSPR and MFA registration is totally separate, are two different things, and we're actually merging. They're actually being merged, if not already for you. And And that has allowed Microsoft, of course, to consolidate the authentication methods as well in one policy screen, which is a really great functionality.
Yeah. This I see we have more than a year to migrate our policies, but I think this was a great tech talk about the migration options of authentication methods, and also to actually to get rid of the legacy ones. Have a single interface where you can manage or configure these options. And this also resonates to me in the sense of by so many authentication methods, there's so many choice. You might also be playing around because of the flexibility you have by targeting on specific groups instead of tenant-wide, like authentication strengths in combination with conditional access, where you have very strict or high secure of confidential information, which you might play around with various authentication methods. Perhaps that might be a good candidate for Tech Talk next year.
That definitely is true indeed. They have definitely a relation to each other, because if an authentication method is on purpose enabled for a particular group, that same group could be used within an authentication strength. So that's really a nice one for next year. So let's put that on the agenda, and then we can discuss that in 2023.
Cool. Hey, Pim, thanks. This was a great session to me. It was very insightful. And to all the watchers and listeners, thank you very much for joining another Tech Talk Dudes. And for now, I wish you happy holidays with your loved ones, and wish you already a happy new year. And looking forward to have you back in the next year with many Tech Talks together with Pim and myself.
Yeah.
Pim? It was a pleasure.
Indeed. Yeah, best wishes to the watchers and you as well, of course, Rodney. And next year, first priority, manage your authentication methods policies and do the migration, because before you know it's 2024. But again, have a great Christmas, a happy New Year, and see you in 2023.
Many thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.